Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek UK. I'm Danny Rogers, Editor-in-Chief for PRWeek EMEA and your host for today. So this is a special one-off PRWeek podcast, and it's an interview that I did last week at PR360 with Christine Heffernan, who's the Group Communications Director for Tesco PLC. And Christine and myself were talking about Tesco's employee communication and what an effect it's had on the Tesco brand in terms of communicating with 330,000 of their staff to turn around the brand reputation. So enjoy. Right. Hello again, everyone. And we're now on the penultimate session of PR360, almost there now. But I hope you've had a brilliant morning and enjoyed the whole conference. Very much looking forward to this. It's supposed to be a fireside chat, although it's very warm outside and there's no fire. But I'm
feeling the heat.
So we have Christine Heffernan with us, who's the Group Communications Director for Tesco. And Christine is always one or two of our top retail PR professionals in the industry, in the PRWeek Power Book. So we're going to hear about the transformation and some of the purpose and internal communications initiatives that Tesco has run over the last 10 years. So Christine is, as I say, Group Communications Director for Tesco. She used to be Communications Director for Ireland for Tesco, and you've been there for 10 years overall. Before that, Christine worked for the European Parliament, for the UK Treasury, and for Vodafone Ireland. So you've had an illustrious career until then. But one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you today is this is the 10th anniversary of PR360, and I believe it's a sort of 10th year anniversary for you at Tesco as well, and a 10-year case study, if you like. So tell us a bit about that transformation that's taken place over the past decade.
Will do, thanks Danny, and thank you for inviting me today. So 10 years ago, 2014, was the start of Tesco's turnaround. And one of the really big decisions we made back in 2014 was to put rebuilding trust and reputation as one of our three key objectives for the turnaround. So improving competitiveness, strengthening the balance sheet, and rebuilding trust. And by putting trust and reputation so centre stage, it really set us on a path. And there's been a thread that's run from 2014 to today where reputation is really front and centre in terms of how we have developed our business plans and how we have delivered against them. One of the first steps that we took back in 2014 was to do a really deep piece of listening within the organisation. We did a lot of engagement, consultation with our colleagues to really understand, in a context of a lot of noise around the organisation, how were colleagues really feeling and what did colleagues want from us and what did we need to do to rebuild trust internally and externally. And we got some really clear feedback that we have values that are very well known within Tesco, but there was a sense of disconnect between the rhetoric and the reality. So on that basis, we set forward with a new purpose. So real clarity in terms of what our mission was, what our objective was, I guess. And we've since refreshed the purpose, but our purpose is serving customers, communities and planet a little better every day. So when we had that really clear North Star, then we took the decision, in order to give that real resonance, in order to really make that work for us, the first audience that we really needed to focus on was our colleagues. So really bringing our colleagues with us, really getting them to buy into that. We're actually the largest private sector employer in the UK. We have about 300,000 colleagues working for us in the UK. So the opportunity to turn 300,000 people into advocates or ambassadors for Tesco is obviously a huge step change. So taking that inside-out approach and applying the rigour that the brands would typically apply to engage in the outside world, whether that's media or stakeholders, but applying that same level of rigour and resources and dedication to our colleagues was a really big decision and really set us on, I think, a path that has really, helped us as, over the last 10 years. It's been such an extraordinary 10 years for us, the turnaround, but then obviously for everybody else in respect of facing into a pandemic, a cost of living crisis, lots of volatility in our supply chain, but that level of engagement with colleagues was really critical in getting us to where we are today.
And for context, 2014, 2015 was quite a difficult time for Tesco. There was an accounting scandal, 2014, I believe, and Tesco at that time become quite dominant, quite big. Some of its relationships possibly with its suppliers weren't seen as that great, and possibly that led to some of the disconnect with the staff as well. So that's the context. So how did you start turning that around and changing the narrative?
So I think by being really clear on the purpose and mobilizing behind that at scale. So when we think how do we go about doing this? In our own minds, we sort of devised a strategy where there was 3 distinct phases to how we went about it. And this applied internally and externally. But in the first instance, we wanted to gain permission to be heard. So that really focused on delivering sort of big disruptive moments that really showed that we're really, really serious about our core purpose. So from a customer point of view, there's an awful lot of work done in terms of investing in value. From a community point of view, we did a lot of engagement with colleagues to develop, in consultation with them, a community program. And our colleagues told us that they wanted Tesco to be active in helping children have a better start in life. So we devised a community program on that basis. It's called Stronger Starts. It's a £5 million investment every year where we make about 3,000, 4,000 grants to schools to support breakfast clubs, lunch clubs, etc. And then from an environmental point of view, from a planet point of view, our colleagues told us, do more, go faster. And we did that. So I think in that first phase, we really focused on very tangible, meaningful actions that really moved the dial forward.
When you talk about communities, is that communities around every store, or is that community around head office, or?
Both. I mean, actually, we have a really big footprint in the UK. We have 3,000 stores, we have head office, we have distribution centres as well. So, we want to play a really positive role, a constructive role in the communities that we operate in. And I mean, what we find is that, our colleagues, the sense of pride in the role that Tesco can play is immense. And also our colleagues are the ones that really bring this to life. I mean, they are the people that engage with our customers day in, day out, engage with community groups who come into our stores. I mean, one of the things actually in this phase that we really focused on was a key piece of feedback that came from colleagues was at the end of every day, I mean, necessarily if you're a food business, you're always going to have a certain amount of food left over that's perfectly good food to eat, but you're not going to put it on sale the next day. And, 2014, 15, 16, our colleagues are saying to us, we feel really uncomfortable about the fact that we're throwing out this food. So we devised a program. We worked in partnership with FareShare and Food Cloud, an Irish startup, to create a food redistribution program that 10 years later has donated over 200 million meals of surplus food. We've created this huge infrastructure, and that's on the back of engaging with colleagues. So we really focused, to your question, really focused on showing that we were, really serious about our core purpose. And then the second thing we did was really try to engage colleagues at scale to really bring it to life. So when we launched the purpose, we had, I was this pre-pandemic, pre-lockdown when you could do things like this, but we had a big event in the NEC. We had nearly 9,000 colleagues drawn from all parts of our group, predominantly in the UK, but further afield as well, where we launched the purpose. And then there was an awful lot of engagement falling out of that to really create a moment, a sense of this is change. And since then, we've really focused on innovating so that we're really able to have an ongoing conversation with colleagues in respect of really bringing it to life.
And when you launched the purpose, how did you formulate that purpose? Did you kind of crowdsource that from your staff to get the wording right in what your values and purpose were?
We did. We engaged at every level in the organisation. And I think one of the key learnings that we've had and we've really tried to build on since then is that our colleagues are the people in our business who are closest to customers, the people that work in stores. So being able to really listen and tune into what they want from us, what they think, what their ambitions are for our business. And so increasingly from an internal comms point of view, one of the things that we've really focused on in terms of how we've innovated and evolved our communications is to really focus on a two-way form of comms. So to be really open, transparent, engaging. So some of the things we've done over the last couple of years, I mentioned the big NEC event. Now we have, and by the way, I'm teeing this up because I have a little video, but the way now we engage with our colleagues on an annual basis is we have a really big virtual event. And anybody in the audience who's gone from doing big physical events to virtual events will have had that moment where they think, will this actually resonate with people? Does this feel like a big moment in time? but we worked with ITM Productions, and we created what was sort of a TV style event. Some of it was pre-recorded, some of it was live, but it was a huge moment where we mobilised. In fact, we had about 13,000 people watching live. We told our store managers, don't come into the store that day, stay at home, watch it. We organised payroll in our stores, extra payroll, so that all of our colleagues could take time away from the shop floor and watch and be involved, and we had workshops afterwards, so that as we have evolved the purpose, there's an ongoing dialogue with our colleagues in respect of what that looks like.
Of course, you've got a challenge when you've got 300,000 colleagues, a scale challenge, and of course a lot of your colleagues, they were not sitting behind desks looking at computers, so some internal comms functions you can use that, but you've got to reach them in different ways.
And that's a really good point, and that's the big challenge for retailers, for organisations that are geographically very dispersed. So one of the really big decisions we made over the last 2 or 3 years was to fundamentally change the way we were set up to engage with our colleagues. I think traditionally internal comms functions in Tesco and elsewhere would focus more on senior leaders, and then there would be sort of a more face-to-face cascade, etc., a few briefing points, etc. But we have changed our approach, and we invested in creating a new social media platform, which we launched. We worked in partnership with a startup called First Up, and we created a social media platform which we launched about 12 months ago. And already in the UK, we have 200,000 colleagues using it. About 100,000 are using it repeatedly every month.
On their phones? Is that how they get onto it?
On their phones, on their phones. And the brilliant thing is, I suppose, look, one of the things Tesco is very famous for is its, I suppose, skill set in using insight that has powered Clubcard to really deliver value for customers. And there was a point 2 or 3 years ago where we said to ourselves, why are we not doing that to engage our colleagues? So we managed to encourage some people from the Clubcard team to join the internal comms team, and we hired new skills to complement the skills that we already have. And we launched the social media platform, which really was a very sort of open, transparent, engaging way of having a two-way conversation with our colleagues. And because of the insight that we had from news and views, we can tell in the moment what conversations are happening in the organisation. The content that we create, is it interesting to colleagues? Is it hitting the mark? Is it missing the mark? What are colleagues saying? And in instances where there's very live issues, so I'll give you an example. Over the last 12 months, we've really led out on retail crime, like from an external point of view, but also internally, because it's been a subject of a big debate within our business that, unfortunately, all retailers are seeing an increase in assaults. Yeah, well, actually, more so assaults towards retail workers. That's where we draw the line. That's unacceptable. Yeah. And so on the back of feedback that we can see in how we do our business, but also we hear from colleagues, then we created a campaign which really focused on bringing about a change in the law to make an assault against a retail worker a criminal offence. So it's just an example of how through this platform we're able to listen, learn, engage, and have a very different type of conversation internally.
That's very interesting, because of course Clubcard was famous for sort of understanding the customer base so well, understanding every individual through their buying habits, and you can then use some of that same technology or same skill set to really understand your own workforce, presumably. Is that true?
Yeah, that's it. And actually, in real time, have conversations and understand what are the things going on within the organisation that really matter to people, and how do we bring that to life. And when we look at all of the insights and the analytics that we have, we know that there's a couple of topics that is something our colleagues feel really passionately about. So we've really upweighted how we showcase and how we share the stories at store level in relation to what we're doing. We also know that, understandably, that colleagues are interested in, where they can get the best value, what offers we have, what benefits. So we've really turned up the dial on that as well. But the beauty of the investment that we've made in the platform is it means we can really tailor our messages as well. So in an organisation of 300,000, we can now be very specific about, there's certain colleagues who, have preferences because they're interested in cooking, or they're interested in community, or they work in this part of the country. So we can really get quite granular in terms of how we can target specific messages. And I think that all adds up to us being able to just be much more coherent in terms of engaging colleagues on their terms.
And presumably you had to get your bosses and the senior leadership to buy into this as well, to to really embrace this idea of communicating throughout the organisation?
Yeah, but that wasn't a hardship at all, because I think because we have real clarity in terms of what our purpose is, and intrinsic to that is people supporting it and people feeling that it represents them. And I think we recognise that in the absence of having a way to have a conversation, not to communicate to, but to have a conversation with all of our colleagues, that we're never really going to be able to unlock the full opportunity. So I mean, there was a lot of support for it. I mean, what we actually had to do as communicators was really think differently about how we worked, because I suppose there's a traditional way of internal communications that just doesn't cut it anymore. And the way we set up the team, we consulted actually with a lot of other organisations to see what's best practice. We actually got input from lots of journalists as well, because I mean, essentially, within our group communications function now, we have an internal comms team who they almost sort of set themselves up as a newsroom, sort of rolling content creators, we have moderators, we have an out of hours duty roster, so that if colleagues in stores on Sundays or in the DC centre at night time are engaging, we're listening as well. So I mean, it's been quite radical in terms of how we've set ourselves up, but it's also been a shot in the arm in terms of how we have set ourselves up from a comms point of view.
And how do you measure the progress of that? Do you every few months or every year poll your staff to see how they feel about the company and whether they feel they're being heard?
I wish it was every few months or every year. It's daily, right?
Okay.
It's daily.
It's because, sentiment tracker.
Well, because we can see through news and views, we have like a really, really clear idea about what people are talking about. So just by way of example, on News and Views right now, which is what we call our social media platform, if I have a video, we'll show it, but about 75-80% of the content is user-generated content, which is interesting in itself. I mean, it points to a certain culture that, when we went live with it, we were a little bit nervous about whether we would have that level of engagement. So super encouraged that we have, but we have a wealth of insight through the platform, but also then on a twice yearly basis, we do an anonymous sort of sentiment survey. We call it Every Voice Matters, and it's quite extensive in terms of trying to ascertain colleagues' perceptions on Tesco as a place to work, Tesco as a place to shop, the kind of support, benefits, communications, etc. I mean, it's fairly
it's
expansive.
Anonymous, is it?
It's anonymous. The value of it is that it is anonymous, and so we can track sentiment on a range of different measures. And News and Views is only 12 months old at this stage, but we can already see that there has been a big step forward in colleagues associating between what they do and delivering on the purpose. And also we've seen an improvement in the quality of communications within the organisation. I think it's interesting from a comms point of view, like the role of the comms team, we've got a really big job, goes without saying, in terms of leading out on the communications, but also we've got a bigger job equipping other people to communicate. And that has been something we've really focused on through News and Views as well. So it's kind of created this 360 effect, which is really big focus on raising awareness, but also big focus on equipping leaders to be really engaged and to comment and to be present on it. So and also I think it's indicative of the change in tone of voice as well. And I think one of the things from a brand point of view is that there's a real warmth and humanity to and a degree of fun in terms of how we want Tesco to show up, and we've really focused on trying to deliver that through News and Views as well.
Because obviously we've got lots of different organisations and comms leaders in here. What advice would you give after your 10-year journey and focus on internal comms? What are the key tips, would you say?
So I've touched on a few of them. I think the first is to really root your planning in insight, to be really open to engaging, consulting, collaborating, because I think it gives you a mandate that you don't have otherwise, and it equips you with the right tools to do what needs to be done. So I think that's something that we have learnt is really critical, none more so than with News and Views, because we don't ask ourselves what do colleagues want to know about anymore, because they tell us and we know, which is transformational. To be a little bit brave and to innovate, to not worry about missing the mark, because when we launched News and Views, we had concerns about creating this huge space where all of our colleagues could, give views on anything that was on their mind. And look, as comms director, I can tell you, I had a few moments before that went live, and I was like, I hope this goes okay. But actually, what's happened is conversations that are being had in the organisation surface through news and views, which is brilliant because it gives us an opportunity to listen and to address. So that has worked really well. And also because of the velocity, because of the nature of it as a tool and social media being what it is, if we do something that isn't quite right, well, we can do something else very, very quickly. So that has given us a lot of confidence in terms of how we would want to progress. And then I think the final thing is just two-way comms, just listen, respond, listen, respond. It's critical to our journey as well.
Now, I've got a theory that last year probably marked the end of peak purpose campaigning in communications. In this polarised social and political environment with culture wars and everything. We had Celia Richardson from the National Trust yesterday talking about the effect of kind of culture wars on talking about your values as an organisation. Does that affect you, because you now have a clear purpose that you've communicated and worked with your internal audience, but are you wary about communicating that purpose externally for those reasons?
Well, no, not at all. I mean, points well made. The trends that you touched on in terms of skepticism or polarisation, I think for organisations it will probably reframe the way they think about talking about their purpose. But no, I think, from a Tesco point of view, like our purpose, is the truth of our business. It's come about because it's something that, our colleagues want and identify with, and it informs what we do. And that won't change. I think in a broader sense, social purpose, 5-10 years ago is business as usual today for businesses, and that's because there is an expectation that businesses behave in a particular way. And I guess we operate in an environment where there's a lot of scrutiny, and I think that's a good thing. With, I suppose, converging standards or mandatory reporting, increasingly you'll see companies reporting against a common set of metrics, and I think that probably will quench the wiggle room that maybe some organisations are able to eke out at the moment in terms of how they present their agenda, because I think there'll be a levelling up. And I think that's a good thing, and I think that that's an opportunity. So I think going forward, the organisations that will get the cut through are organisations that are going to be able to show what they're doing. So I think moving away from big announcements of intent to actually being able to show tangible proof points of progress.
That's a very good point.
And I think that's interesting.
And your purpose statement again is?
You're testing,
Yeah.
It's serving customers, communities and planet a little better every day.
Yeah, so it's quite a humble purpose statement, isn't it? And it's quite sort of like we're working harder all the time, rather than a sort of grandiose, we're going to go out and change the world for the better sort of purpose statement, which maybe some companies have run into trouble with.
It represents that every little is, about constant endeavour, that, little helps make a big difference. I gave the example of the food surplus donation programme. When we started donating surplus food in 10 stores in Dublin, actually, that was the trial. And now, 10 years later, it's over 200 million meals. But we didn't start thinking it would be 200 million meals, but it's just that endeavour that I think is at the heart of our brand.
Yeah, it makes it very authentic if you do things and they work and then you carry on doing them. But your purpose statement enables you to do that, work bit by bit at it. When there's big stories in the media that you're tempted or you're pressured to comment on, are you able to? Does your purpose and your values enable you to judge whether you comment on a particular issue?
For the most part, we do comment because we take the view that if somebody, whether it's a media outlet or an NGO, has a perspective on Tesco, then let's meet them in the middle and let's have that discussion. I think what's important, given the amount of scrutiny on brands and given the proliferation of communications channels, which is creates opportunities and it creates challenges. But I think what's really important is, regardless of the issue and regardless of how contentious the issue is, to represent a point of view. And I think, people might disagree with your point of view, but I think there's real credibility and integrity for companies fronting up and saying, well, this is what happened, or this is why we've done this, or this is how this is going to play out. I think that level of openness and engagement is really important.
Yeah, I think it's a really good strategy, really. If you focus on your staff and you focus on your communities, you kind of know where you're going with your purpose. Whereas if you just go straight externally with big statements, you run into some trouble. So just one final question from me. You've been on this 10-year journey and it's obviously been quite a transformation with some quite effective results. But what now? You've got a new CEO, I believe, as well, who will have their own view on
That's right, yeah,
what they want
Matthew,
the reputation of Tesco to be like. So where do you go now?
Well, look, I think we are, really guided by our purpose. We're really guided by our values. I think we need to really keep listening to what our colleagues want and what our customers want, and keep on that journey. So, I think it's keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good advice, Christine. Thanks so much. So great to hear from one of UK's leading companies and leading communications directors. Really appreciate you turning up. Thank you. Well, that's it for this week's show. A big thanks to Christine Heffernan for appearing at PR360 and a really fascinating chat. If you've enjoyed today's episode, then we'd love it if you could leave a review, please, wherever you access PRWeek's Beyond the Noise podcast. That's all for today. Thank you for listening, and join us again soon.